Act 1. The Sun King's Shadow. In the latter half of the 17th century, France glittered as the undisputed center of European power and culture. At its heart reigned Louis XIV, the Sun King, a monarch of absolute authority and unparalleled grandeur. His court at Versailles was a dazzling spectacle of wealth, etiquette, and intricate political maneuvering. It was an era of extravagant balls, brilliant artistry, and military might. Yet, beneath the gilded surface of Louis XIV's France, in the shadowy depths of its state prisons, lurked secrets dark enough to threaten the very foundations of the throne. And none was darker, nor more enduring, than the mystery of a prisoner known to history only as the Man in the Iron Mask. His story begins not with a name, but with a number and a location. In the summer of 1669, Benign d'Auvergne de Saint-Mars, the governor of the remote fortress prison of Pinerolo, in the French Alps, received a highly sensitive prisoner. Accompanying the prisoner were strict instructions from the king's ministers. The man was to be kept in utmost secrecy, his identity concealed from everyone, including the prison staff. He was to have no contact with the outside world, and, crucially, measures were to be taken to ensure his face was never seen. Thus began one of the most bizarre and lengthy imprisonments in history. For the next 34 years, this nameless prisoner would follow Saint-Mars like a shadow as the governor moved from post to post, transferred through a succession of France's most formidable prisons: Pinerolo, the isolated fortress of exiles, the island prison of Sainte Marguerite off the coast of Cannes, and finally, the infamous Bastille in the heart of Paris. Throughout this entire period, spanning more than 3 decades, the prisoner's face remained hidden. The legend immortalized by writers like Voltaire and Alexander Dumas speaks of a mask made of iron, a cruel and heavy device permanently affixed to the prisoner's head. Historical accounts, however, paint a slightly different, though no less mysterious, picture. Contemporary records and eyewitness descriptions suggest the mask was likely made not of iron, but of black velvet, reinforced perhaps with whalebone or steel strips. It wasn't necessarily worn at all times, especially when the prisoner was alone in his cell, but it was mandatory whenever he was in the presence of others or being transported. The purpose was clear: absolute concealment of his identity. What makes this prisoner's story so uniquely compelling is the strange paradox of his captivity. While his identity was ruthlessly suppressed, he was treated with unusual deference for a prisoner of the era. He was lodged in relatively comfortable cells, often with multiple rooms. He was provided with fine clothing, books, and even allowed to play the lute. His meals were prepared by the governor's own cook, and Saint-Mars himself served him, reportedly standing respectfully, hat in hand, in his presence. The prisoner was attended by physicians when ill. Yet the secrecy was absolute. Guards were under strict orders to kill him instantly if he ever spoke of anything other than his immediate needs or attempted to reveal his identity. The slightest glimpse of his face meant death, both for the prisoner and, potentially, for the observer. Who was this man, whose identity was so dangerous that the Sun King's regime went to such extraordinary lengths to erase him from the world while simultaneously treating him with a semblance of respect? The answer remained locked away, hidden behind a velvet mask and the stone walls of France's darkest prisons. Act 2. Whispers Behind Walls. Life for the masked prisoner unfolded in a suffocating bubble of secrecy and isolation, punctuated only by his transfers from one prison to another, always under the watchful eye of his dedicated jailer, Saint-Mars. While direct communication was forbidden, the very nature of his extraordinary captivity inevitably led to whispers, rumors, and tantalizing glimpses that only fueled the mystery surrounding him. His first long imprisonment was at Pinerolo, a fortress high in the Italian Alps, then under French control. Here, St. Mars housed him in a specially prepared cell, ensuring maximum security and isolation. Pignerol held other high-profile state prisoners, including the disgraced superintendent of finances, Nicolas Fouquet, and the Comte de Lauzun, a nobleman who had fallen foul of the king. Interactions between these prisoners were strictly forbidden, yet breaches occasionally occurred, providing fleeting hints about the masked man. One famous anecdote tells of the masked prisoner scratching a message onto a silver plate and tossing it out of his cell window, where it was found by a fisherman. The fisherman, unable to read, naively returned the plate to St. Mars. The governor, after intensely questioning the fisherman to ensure he hadn't deciphered the message, reportedly said, "Go. It is lucky for you that you cannot read." Another story speaks of a different prisoner finding a fine linen shirt with writing on it, presumably dropped by the masked man, and smuggling it to St. Mars, hoping for a reward but receiving only further confinement. These tales, though possibly embellished, highlight the desperate attempts of the prisoner to communicate and the extreme measures taken to prevent it. During his time at Pignerol, the masked prisoner was reportedly served by a valet named Eustache Daguerre, another mysterious figure whose own story became entangled with the legend. Daguerre, arrested in 1669, the same year the masked prisoner arrived, was also held under conditions of extreme secrecy, forbidden to speak to anyone except his jailers. Was Daguerre merely a servant, or was he another prisoner whose secret was somehow linked to the man in the mask? The lines blurred, adding another layer of intrigue. In 1681, after 12 years at Pignerol, the prisoner was transferred, along with St. Mars, to the nearby fortress of Exils. The journey was conducted with elaborate precautions, the prisoner carried in a sealed sedan chair, his face masked, surrounded by armed guards. 6 years later, in 1687, another transfer took them south, to the island fortress of Sainte Marguerite, located in the Mediterranean Sea just off the coast of Cannes. It was on Sainte Marguerite that the legend began to truly solidify. The island setting provided both security and visibility. Locals on the mainland could see the fortress, and stories circulated about the mysterious prisoner kept in the highest tower, his face perpetually hidden. An officer who served at the fortress later recounted seeing the prisoner, describing him as tall, well-built, and dignified. He noted the prisoner wore a mask with steel springs that allowed him to eat without removing it. He also observed the governor, St. Mars, treating the prisoner with immense respect, always addressing him as "my prince." This detail, whether true or exaggerated, was explosive. Could the masked man truly be royalty? Throughout these decades of confinement, the prisoner's health remained remarkably good. He suffered occasional ailments, but received medical attention. He read, he played music, he existed in a world shrunk down to the size of his cell, his only constant companion the enigmatic St. Mars. He was a non-person, a living secret whose crime was apparently nothing more than his own identity. Act 3. The Royal Twin Theory. As whispers about the respectful treatment afforded to the masked prisoner spread, particularly the alleged use of the title, "My Prince," speculation inevitably turned towards the highest echelons of French society, the royal family itself. And the most sensational, enduring, and romantic theory was born. The prisoner was none other than the secret twin brother of King Louis XIV. This theory, though lacking concrete historical proof, possesses a compelling, almost novelistic logic that has captivated the public imagination for centuries. It was first hinted at by the philosopher Voltaire in the mid-18th century and later popularized in spectacular fashion by Alexandre Dumas in his novel, The Vicomte de Bragelonne, the final installment of his D'Artagnan romances, which includes the Three Musketeers. The theory goes like this. In 1638, Anne of Austria, the wife of King Louis XIII, gave birth to a healthy son, the future Louis XIV. However, hours later, she unexpectedly gave birth to a second, identical twin boy. King Louis XIII and his powerful chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, or later, Cardinal Mazarin, depending on the version, were thrown into a panic. The existence of identical twins posed a grave threat to the stability of the monarchy. What if the second twin later challenged his brother for the throne? What if factions formed around the two claimants, plunging France into civil war? The potential for dynastic chaos was immense. To prevent this, a ruthless decision was made. The birth of the second twin was concealed. The child was spirited away in secret, raised in obscurity by trusted guardians, completely unaware of his royal lineage. However, as the boy grew into a young man, perhaps he discovered the truth of his birth, or perhaps his resemblance to the king became too striking to ignore. He became a liability, a living embodiment of a dangerous state secret. Louis XIV, upon learning of his twin's existence, or perhaps having known all along, faced a terrible dilemma. He could not acknowledge his brother, yet he could not bring himself to execute his own flesh and blood. The solution was a cruel compromise, lifelong imprisonment under conditions of absolute secrecy. The velvet mask became the instrument of this erasure, allowing the twin to live but ensuring his face, identical to the king's, would never be seen, his claim never uttered. This theory elegantly explains many of the puzzling aspects of the case: the extreme secrecy, the need to hide the prisoner's face, the respectful treatment, as one would treat royalty, even in disgrace, and the lifelong nature of the sentence. It fits the dramatic, almost theatrical, nature of Louis XIV's reign, a world where appearances were everything and state secrets were guarded with lethal force. Voltaire, writing decades after the prisoner's death, claimed to have spoken to individuals who had served him. He described the prisoner as being of medium height, elegant, and possessing a remarkably fine voice. He noted the prisoner's taste for fine linen and lace, suggesting an aristocratic background. While Voltaire didn't explicitly name the prisoner as the king's twin, his writings heavily implied a royal connection, planting the seed for Dumas's later masterpiece. Dumas, in his novel, took the theory and ran with it, creating the iconic image of the Iron Mask and weaving a thrilling tale of conspiracy, identity, and sacrifice. His fictionalized account, though historically inaccurate in many details, particularly the Iron Mask, became so powerful that it largely overshadowed the more complex historical reality. Was the man in the Iron Mask truly the Sun King's hidden twin? It's a tantalizing possibility, a story worthy of the grand dramas played out at Versailles. But without definitive proof, it remains just that, the most famous, but ultimately unproven, theory among many. Act 4. Unmasking other suspects. While the royal twin theory captured the public imagination, historians and researchers have proposed numerous other candidates for the man in the Iron Mask, grounding their theories more in the political realities and known prisoners of Louis XIV's reign. These alternative suspects, though perhaps less romantic, offer plausible explanations for the extreme secrecy surrounding the prisoner. One prominent candidate was Count Ercole Antonio Mattioli, an Italian diplomat from the Duchy of Mantua. In the late 1670s, Mattioli acted as an intermediary in secret negotiations between Louis XIV and the Duke of Mantua for the French acquisition of the strategic fortress of Casale. Mattioli, however, allegedly betrayed Louis XIV's trust by revealing the secret negotiations to other European powers, potentially for personal gain. This double cross infuriated the Sun King. Mattioli was subsequently kidnapped by French agents in 1679 and imprisoned, first at Pignerol. His name certainly fits the time frame and the need for secrecy, as imprisoning a foreign diplomat under such circumstances was a major breach of international protocol. However, historical records indicate that Mattioli died at St. Marguerite in 1694, whereas the masked prisoner lived until 1703 and died in the Bastille. This discrepancy casts significant doubt on the Mattioli theory, unless the records of his death were falsified. Another theory centered on Nicolas Fouquet, Louis XIV's disgraced superintendent of finances. Fouquet was arrested in 1661 for embezzlement and treason, having amassed enormous wealth and power that rivaled the king's own. He was initially sentenced to banishment, but Louis XIV, fearing Fouquet still held dangerous secrets, commuted the sentence to life imprisonment. Fouquet was held at Pignerol under St. Mars's watch until his death, officially recorded in 1680. Could the masked prisoner have been Fouquet, his death faked, kept alive in secret for decades longer? Or perhaps a secret agent or accomplice of Fouquet whose identity needed to be suppressed? This theory connects to the known political intrigues of the era, but struggles with the official record of Fouquet's death. A more obscure but intriguing candidate was Eustache Daguerre, the mysterious valet who was arrested in 1669 and also held under extreme secrecy, sometimes serving the masked prisoner. Some historians have argued that Daguerre was the man in the iron mask, not his servant. His arrest coincided with the arrival of the masked prisoner at Pignerol. The extreme secrecy surrounding Daguerre, threaten him with death if he speaks one word except about his needs, mirrors the conditions imposed on the masked man. Who was Daguerre? Theories range from him being a disgraced nobleman involved in political plots or scandalous affairs, like the affair of the poisons, a secret agent who knew too much, or even, in some versions, the true father of Louis XIV. Identifying Daguerre as the masked man simplifies the narrative, but doesn't fully explain the unusually respectful treatment the masked prisoner reportedly received. Other proposed candidates have included a disgraced French general, such as the Duc de Beaufort or Lieutenant General Vivien de Bulland, who might have been imprisoned for cowardice or treason. Richard Cromwell, the son of Oliver Cromwell, briefly Lord Protector of England, though this seems highly improbable. Molière, the famous playwright, supposedly imprisoned by the king for satirizing the court, a fanciful theory with no historical basis. Each of these theories has proponents and detractors, pieces of evidence that fit, and contradictions that undermine them. The historical record is fragmented, obscured by deliberate secrecy and the passage of time. What remains clear is that the prisoner was someone whose identity was considered exceptionally dangerous to the French state, requiring erasure from the world while paradoxically demanding a certain level of respectful treatment. Act 5. The Enduring Enigma. On November 19, 1703, after 34 years of silent captivity, the mysterious prisoner died within the cold, gray walls of the Bastille. He had been ill for only a short time. His death was recorded under the pseudonym Marchioli, likely a variation of Mattioli, though this entry is widely considered to be deliberately misleading. The secrecy that shrouded his life extended even beyond his death. Immediately following his demise, St. Mars ordered the prisoner's cell to be completely stripped. All his furniture, clothing, and personal belongings were burned. The walls of the cell were scraped down and whitewashed, the floor tiles removed, and even the metal fittings melted down, all in a final, desperate effort to obliterate any possible clue to his identity that might have been hidden or scratched onto the surfaces. He was buried the next day in the Bastille's parish cemetery under the same false name. His grave, like his true identity, was quickly lost to history. The man in the iron mask was gone, but his mystery was just beginning. The very measures taken to erase him only served to amplify the intrigue surrounding his existence. Voltaire, writing just a few decades later, was among the first to bring the story to wider public attention, hinting at the royal connections and popularizing the image of the Iron Mask. Alexander Dumas's novel cemented the legend in popular culture, creating a romantic, enduring image that continues to fascinate.
So who was he?
Modern historical consensus largely dismisses the royal twin theory as romantic fiction, lacking any credible evidence. While compelling, it remains a product of legend more than fact. Theories involving Eustache d'Aga or Count Mattioli are considered more plausible by many historians, fitting the timeline and the political context of Louis XIV's reign. d'Aga, in particular, remains a strong candidate due to the extreme secrecy surrounding his own arrest and imprisonment, which mirrored that of the masked man. However, definitive proof linking either d'Aga or Mattioli conclusively to the masked prisoner described by eyewitnesses, like the officer on St. Marguerite, is still lacking. The discrepancies in death dates and reported treatment continue to muddy the waters. Perhaps the truth is more complex, involving secrets we can no longer access. The prisoner might have been someone whose identity intersected multiple dangerous secrets, political, diplomatic, and perhaps even personal secrets of the king himself. What is undeniable is the extraordinary nature of the imprisonment. 34 years under constant surveillance, identity suppressed, face hidden. It speaks volumes about the absolute power wielded by Louis XIV and the lengths his regime would go to protect its secrets. The man in the Iron Mask was a victim of raison d'etre, the principle that the interests of the state justify actions that might otherwise be considered immoral or illegal. Today, the man in the Iron Mask remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. He is a ghost haunting the glittering reign of the Sun King, a symbol of absolute power and absolute secrecy. He is a blank slate onto which we can project our fascination with conspiracy, hidden identities, and lost royalty. His velvet mask, mythologized as iron, serves as a potent symbol of identity erased, a question mark embedded in the heart of French history. We may never know his name, see his face, or understand the crime for which he paid such a terrible, lifelong price. He is destined to remain forever the man in the Iron Mask, an enduring enigma, a whisper from the shadows of Versailles.